Do you have knee pain when you're lunging? Let's go over 3 techniques or ways that you can potentially start lunging right now or develop the patterns and the strength to lunge better soon. Let's pop into it. So first, why does your knee hurt when you're lunging? So knees are pretty dynamic, but they're also simple at the same time. Knees are your hinge. They're your hinge joint for your lower leg. What they do is they transmit and translate force from your foot up to your hip. But that also makes them a little bit more vulnerable because as you look at the actual knee joint, it's basically just a bone sitting on top of another bone. There's not a whole lot of bony structural support there, not when we compare it to the actual hip. The hip actually has a ball in a socket, and that makes it inherently more stable. And so our knees, they rely on the joints around them to help protect and help them be more functional. That makes that joint more of a hinge. If you think about the hinge on a door, it relies on the frame, it relies on the actual door to make sure that it's staying safe, that it actually is functioning properly. The hinge itself is not as likely to actually have issues. It's more likely to have issues because of the frame or because of the door. If the door doesn't shut right, or that it's off kilter a little bit, or if the frame actually is shifted, it needs to be secured a little bit better. And so that directly affects our hinge. When it comes back to our knee is the hinge. It can have more issues because it has limited structural support, unlike the hinge on a door. That's pretty sound. But it can rely and be bettered so much from the areas around it, namely our glutes and our glute strength, because that shows us where we can rotate our knee in or out. It also relies on our foot and how we can support the knee and the function of the hip. And so let's pop into our 3 main techniques that I'm going to go over with that kind of thought process in mind. So when we're thinking about our lunges, one thing we can think of is just reducing the load, reducing how much our knee actually has to transmit through it. One of the easiest ways that I have to make that happen is that you use your upper body, use the rest of your body, and something else to help decrease that load. It's basically like lowering the weight. If you can't handle a full load whenever you're doing like a chest press, then lower the weight a little bit. This is how we lower the weight a little bit. So what you're going to do is you're going to press down on that long foam roller and stand up, and press down on that long foam roller and come down. The other way that I want you to do this is to actually set your knee on the ground. And so that gives you the ability to not have to hold load at the bottom of your movement. And so if we're looking from the front, as we think about our control through here, as I'm pushing down on this, I'm enabling my front leg, which is going to hold the most of my load when I'm doing the reverse lunge. I'm offloading it through the foam roller, through my upper body. And that makes me be able to hold my knee a little bit further out. Like if I had a laser pointer on my knee, I'm going to point it out just slightly. I don't want it to be here as I'm doing my reverse lunge. I want it to just be pointing straight, but I definitely don't want it to be fading in. When I fade in, as you think about those 2 bones that come in, your femur and your tibia, as they come into the knee joint, this puts a kink on them because of how my ankle is. I'm sagging in, I'm lowering my arch support, and I'm not able to support those 2 bones coming together. If I'm straight, now I'm able to pivot at those 2 bones so much better. And my foot is now at an optimal angle to be able to move forward and back, and now I can access my glute better. When I fade in, I'm not using my glute as much. I'm going to have to use my quad more, which enables me or puts pressure on my knee even more because of my kneecap and the dynamics that go on there. And so as we think of the knee in or out, we want to think of that laser pointer coming off my knee going straight or a little bit out to the side. Then pushing down through the foam roller and standing up. This gives us that support that we need. As you get better at this, then you can just put one hand on it and you can start to get where you don't need to have as much pressure on here, and you can make that movement come from that front part of your leg, from the front leg. Number two kind of is melded into number one, because I talked about letting your knee rest on the ground. Well, if you have a bolster or something that's underneath your knee that can help pick it up from the floor a little bit better, then you don't have to go as low. So as you notice, now my knee, if I was all the way at the floor, it would have been about 90 degrees. Well, you'd be surprised what even just a little bit of help up helps with your knee. This gives you a little bit of movement forward. And so then as you stand up, you don't have to pull and make your knee work from as low of a point. And so raising it up just a little bit can help a ton whenever you're actually doing the lunge. And again, having that rest point at the bottom makes it where you don't have to hold pressure through the knee at the bottom of the lunge as if you were doing a regular lunge. Because now, here, this is still loaded, but with the actual support, now it gets a little bit of a break whenever it has the highest amount of stress on the actual knee joint. So having just a bolster, or one of my favorite exercise equipment, is just a foam pad. You can do so much with a little foam pad. It's amazing. So add the foam pad in, keeping the dynamics that we talked about in the front one, the first one, and get your reverse lunge on. So the next and final way that we're going to talk about helping your reverse lunge is that you are going to actually hip hinge in your lunge. And so I want you to think about hip hinging forward, not slouching forward, but this hip hinge enables you to use more glutes. Because if we think about our hip hinge, anytime we're adding in more of a hip hinge, what we're doing is we're enabling this part of our body, our posterior chain, to do more to help us with the activity. Think about deadlifts. As you hip hinge, that is going to enable you to use more of your posterior chain. You're going to use more core, you're going to use more glutes and more hamstrings. And so if we want to offload some of the pressures that the knee gets, then one of the things is decreasing how much quad we're using. We want to actually use and engage more of our other muscles to help it be more dynamic as a whole and using more different groups. So what you're going to do is you're going to hip hinge forward, which is going to enable you whenever you start pressing down, and you'll start to feel it, is that you're not just going to be engaging your quad, you're going to feel that hamstring and that glute really working for you. And same thing as you're going back down, hip hinge to offload. This also enables you to move your chest and your weight over top of your foot easier than trying to move your knee forward to get that. Now, if your knee drifts forward and over top of your toes a little bit and then comes back, that's perfectly fine. It's not something that we really need to be like harping on every single time. But as our knee moves forward, you can see that my ankle gets even more. I flex my knee more. With that, you are going to have more load put through that knee. And so if I'm able to get my weight forward over top of my foot, then I'm not going to have to load my knee as much to make that movement happen. And I'm able to get in a lot of the other muscles that I want to use anyways, because what makes our knee come out to the side a little bit is our glute, or our glutes, because we have more than one. We have a min, a med, and a max. And so as you're going through some of these different techniques, either using your hand to press, using a bolster underneath of your knee, or adding in that hip hinge. These are all things to try for you to offload your knee, use other muscles, and give that hinge a little bit more support. I hope these are useful techniques for you. Let me know in the comments below if you have another one that you love or that you would like to see demoed, or another area that you want to know how to work and how to improve, even if you have pain. Bye, y'all.